Now, joining me on the desk with reaction to the news of Congressman Mike Johnson's confirmation as Speaker of the House is someone who's gotten to know him pretty well over the years. This is State Senator District 30, Mike Reese. And we'll start there with kind of what just Colin said. The two top leaders in the House, the two top seats are from Louisiana, with Steve Scalise being the majority leader and, of course, now Mike Johnson being the Speaker of the House. What kind of impact does that have on our state, but also could have here in central Louisiana?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's a big day for Louisiana, and I'm glad that the rest of the world has gotten to see, and the rest of the country's gotten to see the congressman that we've already know to be such a principled leader and such an ethical man. And I think that the state of Louisiana, as you know, has been ravaged by multiple natural disasters in recent years, and through the history of our state, that's made us very reliant upon federal government support to help us recover from those. That oftentimes is never done timely. It oftentimes is very, very complicated, and we have a lot of communities across Louisiana today that are continuing to try to recover and kind of fight that process. So, you know, with Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise together, I think we're really well positioned to make sure that we can get the kind of federal support we need to finish recovering from some of those disasters as one example.
So here in central Louisiana, of course, the state, we know who Mike Johnson is, but really kind of an unknown name in parts of the rest of the country. In your opinion, what does a Mike Johnson House speakership look like for Congress?
Well, first of all, I'll say this. When Mike Johnson was first elected, they went to their first freshman retreat with all the members that got elected that year, which was about 7 years ago. And he was so fed up with the way politicians treated one another in Washington and on television. It set such a bad example for the citizens of our state and around our country, right? There just was no civility. And the very first action he took was to create this civility contract that I think 50 some odd colleagues of his freshman class agreed to sign. He just, you know, and he just kept repeating it over and over, you know, that you can disagree without being disagreeable. And he believes that, and he lives his life by it. And I think that over time, his colleagues have seen that same style, you know, that you can disagree without being disagreeable and treat one another with civility. And he's held a high standard. And I think that that's what you'll see him do as Speaker of the House. You know, they have a lot of hard issues in front of them. They certainly will not all agree on the best way to solve them. But he is the kind of leader that can bring civility to that process. And the civility ultimately brings consensus.
Now, real quickly, the last few weeks have been a back and forth. The next few weeks ahead of the November 17th deadline to avoid a government shutdown, sure also to be hectic for Congress and, of course, Mike Johnson as well. You always spoke about Fort Johnson and the impacts that a government shutdown would have on the military families. Right. How important is the next few weeks for Congress and for Mike Johnson in his new spot?
No, look, I think he's perfect for that role in that regard. He knows firsthand, because of the impacts in his district, Barksdale Air Force Base and Fort Johnson, how absolutely important it is, especially with all the challenges we face around the world today, that you have a functioning federal government, and that the main role and responsibility of the federal government is our national defense. He understands that clearly. He talks about it often, and I think that he knows more than anybody else how important it is that they don't only get this budget resolved, but that we get back to regular order in terms of adopting budgets for all of our agencies. And he understands how important it is to prioritize the military.
Well, certainly an historic day here in Louisiana. Plenty more work to be done, but thank you for coming into the studio and sharing everything.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dylan.
All right, thank you.